Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toys and Ford. Also, shout out to Resonance Branding Company, the official swag provider for the show and the podcast. Coming up on this episode of the podcast, we are 2 weeks away. 2 weeks from today, July 8th, for the start of training camp. For the Packers. So I've got 14 storylines. 14 because, well, today is July 8th. 2 weeks from today, that's 14 days. 14 storylines about the Packers. Top 14 storylines, in my opinion, about the Packers leading into training camp. So we're going to do two of them on today. We're going to do two of them, and then we're going to extend this all the way out until training camp actually kicks off. So, but before we get to that, I want to talk a little Brewers here quickly, and the Brewers have made a couple of trades. You know, they've acquired Dallas Keuchel a couple weeks ago. Aaron Savalia, they just acquired, and he's already made a start for the Brewers. So they've acquired a couple of starting pitchers. And, you know, I think when we asked this question a few weeks ago, what was the biggest need for this Brewers team? What was the biggest need for this Brewers team that they needed to address before the trade deadline? And I think a lot of us would have said starting pitchers. So a question I've kind of floated out there, okay, they've added a couple starting pitchers. Is their biggest need still starting pitching, or is it a bullpen arm, or is it some offensive depth, or whatever the case may be? I still think it's starting pitching. Now, the Brewers have arms. It's just, I think, and especially when they get guys coming back, Joe Ross, D.L. Hall, you know, they're going to get some guys healthier. Devin Williams obviously coming back at the back end to be their closer, bullpen arm and such. They've got arms. I think the question is it quality arms? Do they have enough quality arms for this staff here? To me, I think they could use one more starter. Now, Freddie Peralta is going to be a starter rest of the season. Colin Ray's, he's having a fantastic year. Aaron's going to be a part of the starting rotation too, so he's going to be a part of this group. The question then is the last two. Tobias Myers, I think he deserves to be part of the starting rotation. Now, whether the Brewers keep him in there or whether they're going to, whether they're going to move him to the bullpen, that remains to be seen. Dallas Keuchel, is he a long-term fixture? When I say a long-term fixture, is the rest of the season, is he going to be with the Brewers? I think that's still up in the air. To me, if the Brewers add one more starting pitcher, I think the top five, if we do a typical top five starting rotation for the Brewers, it should be Freddie Peralta, Colin Ray, Aaron Savalia. I still say Tobias Myers has pitched his way to be a starter in this rotation. And then I think, it's whoever that new starter is. I think the odd man out should be Dallas Keuchel. I don't know if Joe Ross is a guy they could put in a bullpen, but D.L. Hall, I think they're going to transition back to the bullpen. They've got guys in the bullpen, though, too, that could give you a couple innings relief. Bryce Wilson being one of them. D.L. Hall can give you a couple innings. Jacob Junis can give you, a couple innings. So they've got some options for longer relief pitchers in there. So, again, the question's just going to be how many quality guys do they have? And I think with Devin Williams coming back, it pushed everybody back. Trevor McGill's going to be kind of a setup guy and that sort of stuff. So I still say one more starter. And then I think you've got your typical five-man rotation set. I get this feeling that they're going to put Tobias in the bullpen and they're going to leave Keuchel in as a starter if they do acquire another starter. To me, though, I think Tobias, that month of June that he pitched was fantastic. He deserves to be in that rotation. And I don't know if they could keep Dallas Keuchel around. Could he be a guy that comes out of the bullpen? He's not going to be a guy that's going to pitch you like 6 innings. I think if you get 4 innings out of him, 4 innings of quality relief, quality work, you're good. You're feeling good about that. So that's just my thought. But, with this Dodgers series here too, I think the biggest thing I learned from the Brewers, they're a team that cannot make almost a single mistake, a couple mistakes against some of the top teams in Major League Baseball. They could play with them. but I still don't know if they can consistently beat them. And I think their line of error, the margin of error between the Brewers and a team like the Phillies and a team like the Dodgers, that's where the difference is. Where I feel like, okay, if the Dodgers, the Phillies make a little bit of if they have an error, they make a mistake, they can make up for it right away. I don't think the Brewers can do that yet, and I think we saw that this weekend against the Dodgers. So, all right, let's talk a little Packers now. So we are 2 weeks away from training camp. 2 weeks away from training camp opening up. Hard to believe that, but it is almost football season here. So we are kicking off our series of the top, in my opinion, top 14, since we got 14 days, top 14 storylines, things to watch, that sort of stuff as we approach the start of training camp here. So these are my lists. All right, this is my list. These are my picks. I'm not going to go through all of them today because we're going to highlight one or two per day up until the opening of camp, which is 2 weeks from today. But I welcome other opinions, other picks in that. There's got to be some out there from you. So hit me up with the text. All right, what do you think are some of the top storylines heading into Packers training camp? So with that, I'll highlight two. I'm going to go through two today, just to kind of kick it off here, since we're on the air 10 days out of the 14. There's going to be a couple days where we got to do two of them on there. So I'm going to do two today. My first one, and some of these are going to be very obvious ones here, but I think they're worth mentioning, and they're sort of big storylines, in my opinion at least, heading into training camp. I combine both of these guys because they've been a story all off season, and we're hearing great things about them and all that sort of stuff. But now, once training camp gets going here and preseason and all that, that's going to be our first test. And I'm talking about Christian Watson and Eric Stokes and hamstring gate. Have their soft tissue injuries, have they figured it out? Because we've heard all offseason, even at the end of the regular season, the Packers sending them down to some specialists in Madison to try to figure out what's going on with their soft tissue injuries. Why do they keep pulling hamstrings? What's going on here? And we've heard, Watson's been building up leg strength in one of his legs, and Stokes, kind of the same thing here. They've got all this fancy data that is way above my pay grade to try to even figure out a lot of, that sort of stuff there. But that's great that they think they've got a plan, that they've got it figured out, and they're working towards that. But now with training camp opening up, practices, constant practices, getting ready for games, now we'll start to get a glimpse if they finally got it figured out when it comes to these two guys and their soft tissue injuries. Because Watson and Stokes have to be big players for this team, for this team to live up to the expectations for this upcoming season, to hit their goals, the team's goals. It's championship. It's Super Bowl expectations this year. Based off of how last year went, the excitement and how they played, there's some high goals, and rightfully so, and there should be this year. But for the team to do that, Watson and Stokes have to be big-time contributors to this ball club. All talk offseason has been, do the Packers have a number one wide receiver? Do they even need a number one wide receiver? And if they don't have that number one wide receiver, who's that guy that could develop into a number one wide receiver? And the prevailing theory out there is that Christian Watson is the guy that could develop into a number one type of receiver. He's got the height, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got big play potential. The only issue with Christian Watson has been, can he stay healthy? If Christian Watson can stay healthy and play double-digit games this year, he's a difference maker within this offense. He is the guy that can spread the ball around, be your deep threat. If he is healthy and he is playing at a high level, at a level that I think, that level, that second half that maybe we saw in his rookie year, where he was just looking lights out, right? We all can remember that kind of got started with that game against Dallas. That turned the page. If that's what we see from Christian Watson throughout the entire season this year, that is a big-time element within this offense. But the biggest question is going to be, can he stay on the field? Can he stay healthy? Keep hearing about they've got it figured out. They've got the plan in place. Well, let's see it now. Same with Stokes. Going back to the offseason, to the draft, a lot of people thought, okay, Green Bay, they're going to need some corners. Bringing in Jeff Hafley as defensive coordinator, he's got a secondary background. He likes his corners to play man versus man coverage. Packers may need some more corners to go with that because you got Jair, but then it's Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon. Probably need some more depth there. Stokes was up in the air because, again, the injuries. Stokes, if he's healthy and he's got that figured out and his injuries are in the past, that's not to say that he's not going to, get banged up here or there. Odds are it's going to happen. But as he turned the corner from that gruesome leg injury he suffered in his sophomore year, that has kind of derailed his young career so far because in his rookie season, Eric Stokes played really well. He was thrown in as a starter because of injuries to Jair and others. Remember, that was when they also had to acquire Rasul Douglas and such. But Eric Stokes had a solid rookie year. And then going into his sophomore year, his second year, there were some high expectations. Then he got hurt. And then last year just never was able to get out on the field. Every time he tried to, it was just a setback. He's got the speed. He's got the height. He's a guy that should play well within this style of defense from Jeff Hafley. But the Packers are going to need him to be out on that field, to be a boundary corner, to utilize that speed. I think the Packers are best, and I love Carrington Valentine, okay? But I think the Packers are best. Their best three corners have to be, or let me just say the best two corners, have to be Jair and Eric Stokes outside on the perimeter. That's your best two. Eric Stokes is going to, if this Packers defense wants to do what, they want to play that press man coverage. They want to line up one-on-one. They need Eric Stokes out there. They need Eric Stokes healthy and playing at a high level out there. So to me, this is one of the biggest stories heading into training camp. Is Watson and Stokes, have they finally figured out their issues, their injury concerns? And are they finally turning that page here? And are they going to be big-time contributors? We keep hearing this stuff that they've got it figured out, and we keep seeing clips from their mini camps and OTAs and all that. This will be our first glimpse into training camp here. My second storyline heading into this one is I'm going to go with Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur / the offense. Because there's a lot of hype surrounding this group, isn't there? There's a lot of excitement surrounding this group. I mean, you read all the blogs and you read all the off-season rankings from all the national pundits out there. There's a lot of hype, a lot of expectations surrounding this group. Jordan Love, the young receivers, they don't need a number one guy. Tight ends, Josh Jacobs coming over. There is a ton of love for this offensive group. How do they live up to those expectations? What does Matt LaFleur have up his sleeve? How is he, what has he done? And we're not necessarily going to know it in training camp, he's not going to open up his playbook in training camp. He's not going to open up his playbook in the preseason. That's just dumb. But we could get a glimpse of some things. Like, what are some groupings? What are some offensive groupings? What are some, are they going to utilize? How often 2 tight end sets? Are we going to see some of that? Are we going to see, A.J. Dillon as part of an H-back role? Are we going to see him utilize that? That was kind of speculated. Is he going to be a fullback type of player? Are we going to see that in training camp? What? This to me, I said it a while ago. If I'm Matt LaFleur, I'm like Dr. Frankenstein, or I'm like a young mad scientist. When I see what I've got here with my offensive skill players and the versatility that they kind of bring and the different things that I can do, I'm excited and I'm pumped. Not to say he has to get way crazy and do some just like out of this world stuff, but he's got some options here, and he's got some versatility where he can get creative with some of his play calls, with some of his formations, with some of his personnel groupings here. So I look at this as Matt LaFleur / the offense heading into training camp. What is it going to look like? And can they live up to all this hype and this talk? Because remember, too, this is a young group. All right? This is a young group. You hope they're not listening to all the talk out there, reading the headlines, reading the tweets, the Facebook messages, all these blogs, talking them up. Hopefully they're kind of muting that out so they're not, reading their own stuff there and getting too big of a head out and such. But I think the sky is the limit for this Packers offense. But the question is, how is it all going to look? And I'm curious to see what are some of the new stuff, what are some of the new wrinkles that Matt LaFleur will have with this group. Will he have Musgrave, Kraft out there together? Are we going to see more 2 tight end sets this year? But they got a lot of depth at wide receiver. How does Josh Jacobs fit into this? Are they going to, is he going to be that bell cow? Where, he's going to be a 3-down back. Not going to be a whole lot of subbing. And what's A.J. Dillon's role going to be this year? Because I'll go back to, I think it was at the owners' meetings in February where Matt LaFleur kind of hinted a little bit at a different role for A.J. Dillon. And I think a lot of us thought, okay, maybe fullback, but maybe it's that H-back role, a role that the Packers have struggled to find somebody to fit that role since Matt LaFleur came in there. They thought it was going to be Josiah DeGuara. It really hasn't turned out that way. Josiah's not even there anymore. So could that be a role for A.J. Dillon? So, again, we're not going to see the playbook, the entire playbook in training camp or in preseason, but maybe we could get a little bit of a glimpse at what Matt wants to do or what some of the formations, the personnel groupings are going to look like, and just see a lot of these guys, what their growth maybe a little bit. Just maybe a little bit of a teaser. Didn't even talk about Jordan Love as much here. And trust me, Jordan Love is going to be a part of this coming up here a little bit later on. But I think, maybe the offense caught a lot of people off guard last year with how well they played down the stretch because you had new guys all across the board, right? Jordan Love was new. All these receivers were new. Aaron Jones missed a lot of time, but he was like the only staple over there. So you had a lot of new stuff. You got more film out on these guys now. You got film out on this offense from the second half, and I guarantee you, these teams like the Eagles, their first game, they're going to be looking at that second half. When they're studying a lot of film, they're going to be looking at that second half Packers offense, be like, okay, what do we got to prepare here for? Who do we got to watch for? All right, so what is Matt LaFleur going to bring in this year that is new, formation-wise, schematic-wise? How does he incorporate all of these players, all of these weapons that he has? That to me is going to be fun to kind of follow. And I think that's a big storyline because those expectations are big for this offense to be a top 5. I would say top 5 group, maybe just outside top 5. I think there's that expectation out there that they're going to be a top 5 or they should be at least a top 5 offense. Or top 6, top 7, somewhere around there. We'll get to more coming up. I've got 12 more here, but I want to kind of spread it out here. Not going to go through all of them here, but my first two storylines heading into training camp. Training camp kicks off 2 weeks from today. Watson and Stokes, have they turned the corner with their hamstrings, with their injuries? Because I think they're pivotal players for this team. Their Super Bowl goals, they got to be two players that got to be a part of that equation. They can't be guys that are just going to play a few games here and still dealing with injuries. That can't happen. For this team to go make a deep run and get a championship, Stokes and Watson have to be big players with that. And my second one, what's this offense going to look like? What's Matt LaFleur got dialed up? How's it all going to look? All right, that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Don't forget to check out the Swag Cave, done by our good friends at Resonance Branding Company. That link to the Swag Cave is in the podcast description. And if you haven't done so already, if you got a few seconds, if you could rate and review the podcast, 5-star rating and a positive review so others can find the Man Cave Podcast. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.